The silence of stars. 300 years ago, humans left their home planet and traveled to the stars. They were excited and full of hope. They wanted to meet other beings and learn about the universe. When they finally made contact with alien life, they found something called the Galactic Concord. This was a group of 12 different species who had been traveling through space for thousands of years. They welcomed humans with smiles and promises of friendship. But the friendship was not what humans expected. The Concord gave humans a role to play. They would be workers. They would be builders. They would be the ones who did the dangerous jobs that no other species wanted to do. Humans accepted this because they were new to space and wanted to prove themselves. They thought that if they worked hard enough, they would earn respect. For 200 years, humans served the Concord faithfully. They built space stations in the cold emptiness between stars. They mined asteroids for valuable metals, and many of them died doing it. The radiation made them sick. The accidents killed them by the dozens. But still they worked, because they believed it would lead to something better. Then the war came. The hive swarms attacked from the outer rim of the galaxy. These creatures were like giant insects, with hard shells and acid that could melt through metal. The Concord needed soldiers to fight them. They looked at their member species and decided that humans were perfect for the job. After all, humans bred quickly, and there were billions of them. They were expendable. Daniel Cruz remembered the war very well. He was only 17 years old when they came to his colony and told him he had been drafted. He did not have a choice. 8 million humans were taken from their homes and given weapons and armor that were worse than what the other species had. They were sent to a planet called Verus Prime to hold the line against the swarms. Daniel watched his friends die on that planet. He saw young men and women torn apart by creatures that felt no mercy. The allied species had better equipment and stayed behind the human lines, letting the humans take the worst of the fighting. When Daniel asked why they would not help, his commanding officer just shook his head and said nothing. The war lasted 5 years. When it finally ended, the Concord celebrated their victory. The alien leaders gave long speeches about sacrifice and unity. They talked about how all species had come together to defeat a common enemy. But Daniel noticed that they did not mention how many humans had died. They did not talk about the colonies that had been destroyed or the families that had been broken. After the celebrations ended, something strange happened. The Concord began to pull away from human space. They closed their trade routes. They removed their protection. They said it was because humans needed to learn independence, but everyone knew the truth. Humans had served their purpose. They were no longer needed. That was 60 years ago. Now Daniel Cruz was an old man of 77. His hair was white and his body was tired, but his mind was still sharp. He stood on a hill outside the city of New Pittsburgh on a colony world called Haven. The sky above him was turning orange with streaks of fire. Ships were entering the atmosphere. Enemy ships. The Keth had come. The Keth were scavengers, one of the lesser species in the Concord. They had been promised human territory in exchange for doing a simple job. They were supposed to wipe out humanity once and for all. The Concord did not want to get their own hands dirty, so they sent the Keth to do the killing. A young woman stood beside Daniel on the hill. Her name was Maria Santos, and she was a lieutenant in the Planetary Defense Force. She held a scanner in her hands and watched the numbers climb higher and higher. How many ships? Daniel asked. His voice was calm, as if he were asking about the weather. Maria looked at him with fear in her eyes. 247. Most of them are carrying troops. And what do we have? 32 fighters that can fly in atmosphere. The orbital station stopped responding an hour ago. I think they destroyed it. Daniel nodded slowly. This was exactly what he had expected. The Concord had taken away humanity's ability to travel between stars decades ago. They said it was for protection, but it was really to make sure humans could never fight back. Without faster-than-light ships, humans were trapped on their worlds like animals in cages. But the Concorde had made a terrible mistake. They thought that without starships, humans would simply give up and wait to die. They did not understand humans at all. Daniel reached for the communication device on his belt. It was old and warm, but it still worked perfectly. He pressed a button and spoke clearly. "This is Sergeant Major Daniel Cruz to all planetary defense networks. Authorization code. Remember Varys. Begin Protocol 17. Maria stared at him. "Sir, what is Protocol 17? Daniel did not answer right away. He was watching the horizon, where the first Keth landing craft were starting to touch down. Smoke rose from the city as buildings burned. People were screaming and running. It looked like the end of the world. But then something changed. All across the planet, hidden doors began to open. These doors had been built in secret over many decades. They led to underground bunkers and factories that the Concorde knew nothing about. Machines that had been sleeping for years suddenly came to life. Lights flickered on in tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the surface. And in space, something began to move. Maria's scanner started beeping wildly. She looked at it, and her mouth fell open. "Sir, I am detecting ships. Hundreds of ships. They are coming from behind the moon." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. It was the first time he had smiled in years. "The Concorde thought they broke us," he said quietly. "They thought we would lie down and die. But they forgot something important about humans." "What is that, sir?" Daniel turned to look at her, and there was fire in his old eyes. "We remember. We remember every single one of our people who died at Varys Prime. We remember every colony they abandoned. We remember every promise they broke. And for 60 years, while they forgot about us, we have been getting ready for this day." Above them, the orange sky began to fill with new lights. These were not Keth ships. These were human ships, rising from hiding places on moons and asteroids and planets that the Concorde had dismissed as worthless. The Shadow Fleet had finally revealed itself. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. What we built in the dark, Commander Grace Liu had spent 30 years living in shadows. She joined the secret program when she was 25 years old. A young engineer who had grown up hearing stories about the betrayal at Varys Prime. Her grandfather had died there, one of millions of humans sacrificed in a war that was never really theirs. When the recruiters came to her university and asked if she wanted to help build something that would change everything, she did not hesitate. The program had no official name. The people who worked in it simply called it the Shadow Fleet. It was humanity's greatest secret and their only hope for survival. Grace spent her first 10 years designing engines. She worked in a facility buried 2 miles beneath a mountain range on Earth. The Concorde had satellites watching the planet constantly, looking for any sign that humans were building weapons or ships. So everything had to be done underground, hidden from eyes in the sky. The work was slow and difficult. They had to smuggle in materials a little bit at a time. They had to develop new technologies using scraps and salvage from the Hive Wars. Every piece of alien equipment that humans could steal or trade for ended up in the Shadow program. Engineers took apart Concorde weapons and figured out how they worked. Then they made them better. By the time Grace was 40, she was commanding her own section of the shipyard. By 50, she was overseeing the construction of an entire dreadnought. And now, at 65, she stood on the bridge of that very ship as it prepared for battle. The ship was called the Reckoning. It had taken 40 years to build, piece by piece, in a hollow space carved out of the dark side of Earth's moon. The Concorde satellites could not see behind the moon, so that was where humanity did most of their building. Millions of workers had lived and died in those hidden facilities, never seeing sunlight. Also that their children and grandchildren might have a chance to survive. "All stations report ready," said Pete Morrison, Grace's first officer. Pete was 62 years old, with gray hair and scars on his face from an accident in the shipyards. He had been with Grace for 20 years. Grace looked at the tactical display in front of her. It showed the Keth fleet descending toward Earth like a swarm of locusts. The aliens had no idea what was waiting for them. They thought they were attacking a defenseless species. They thought this would be easy. "How many ships do we have in position?" Grace asked. Pete checked his console. 47 dreadnoughts, 112 cruisers, 300 assault frigates, and about 2,000 fighters spread across all the carrier groups. Grace let those numbers sink in. Nearly 500 major warships. Every single one had been built in secret, hidden from the Concorde's watchful eyes. It had taken 60 years of patient work, 60 years of sacrifice, 60 years of waiting for this moment. "The Keth commander is sending a message," said the communications officer, a young man named Henry Park. "It is a standard surrender demand. He's telling us to lay down all weapons and accept our fate." Grace felt something cold settle in her chest. She had waited her whole life for this. She had given up marriage, children, a normal life, all for the chance to be here at this moment. "Open a channel," she said. "Let them hear us." Henry pressed several buttons on his console. "Channel open, Commander." Grace stood up straight and spoke in a clear, calm voice. "This is Commander Grace Liu of the Terran Defense Initiative. You have entered human space without permission. You have attacked human worlds without cause. You have 60 seconds to turn your ships around and leave. This is your only warning." The response came quickly. It was laughter. The Keth commander found her words hilarious. His voice came through the speakers, harsh and mocking, translated by the computer into words Grace could understand. "Little humans," the Keth said. "You have no ships. You have no weapons. The Concorde has told us everything about you. You are nothing but workers and farmers. Lay down and accept death with dignity." Grace waited until the laughter stopped. Then she spoke again. 60 seconds have passed. She looked at Pete and nodded. "All ships weapons free." The Shadow Fleet rose from the darkness. They came from behind the moon, hundreds of warships emerging from craters and canyons where they had been hiding. They came from beneath the thick clouds of Venus, where shipyards had been built in floating stations. They came from the frozen moons of Jupiter and Saturn, from asteroid bases in the belt, from everywhere the Concorde had never thought to look. The Keth commander stopped laughing. "What is this?" His voice had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by confusion and fear. "Where did these ships come from?" "This is impossible." But it was not impossible. It was 60 years of human determination. It was the work of generations who have refused to accept extinction. Grace watched on her display as the first wave of human missiles slammed into the Keth fleet. Alien ships began to explode, their hulls torn apart by weapons they had never expected to face. The Keth tried to regroup, tried to form defensive formations, but they were caught completely off guard. "Target their command ship," Grace ordered. "I want their leader to see exactly what humanity has become." The Reckoning's main guns powered up. These weapons had been designed specifically for this moment, built using technology stolen from the Concorde itself and improved by human engineers who refused to accept limitations. When they fired, the beams of energy crossed the distance between ships in less than a second. The Keth command ship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The first shot tore through its shields. The second punched a hole in its hull. The third hit its reactor, and the entire vessel disappeared in a ball of white fire. Grace felt no joy watching it die. She felt only a grim satisfaction that years of planning had finally paid off. "All ships, continue the attack," she commanded. "Do not let a single Keth vessel escape. They came here to kill us. Make sure they understand the cost of that decision." The battle raged across the space above Earth. Human ships that should not have existed tore through an invasion fleet that had expected no resistance. The sky lit up with explosions that could be seen from the planet's surface down below. People looked up and watched. Some of them cried. Some of them cheered. All of them understood that everything had changed. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. But humanity had not forgotten itself. And now, finally, the universe would learn what that meant. The legions descend on the surface of New Pittsburgh. Daniel Cruz watched the battle unfold above him. The sky had become a canvas of fire and light. Keth troop carriers were exploding in the atmosphere, hit by weapons that came from ships the aliens never knew existed. Burning debris fell like rain, leaving trails of smoke across the orange sky. But the battle was not over. Many Keth ships had already landed before the Shadow Fleet revealed itself. Thousands of alien soldiers were now on the ground, spreading through the city, killing anyone they found. The space battle might be turning in humanity's favor, but the people of New Pittsburgh were still in terrible danger. Then something new appeared in the sky. Small objects, falling fast, glowing red with heat as they punched through the atmosphere. They were drop pods, and inside each one were soldiers that the Concorde had never expected to face. Corporal Samuel Ortega was 23 years old. He sat strapped into his crash harness inside a metal pod that was falling toward the planet at incredible speed. The interior was dark, except for red emergency lights. Warning alarms screamed in his ears. The temperature was rising as the heat shields on the outside of the pod burned away. Samuel had trained for this moment his entire life. He had grown up in the underground academies, schools hidden beneath the surface of Earth, where young humans learned to fight. The Concorde thought they had taken away humanity's military. They were wrong. While the Concorde watched from space, humans built a new army in the darkness below. They called themselves the Legions. 30 seconds to surface, announced the calm voice of the pod's computer. Samuel checked his rifle one more time. It was a Terran-made weapon, designed specifically to kill Keth. The aliens had hard shells covering their bodies, and normal bullets could not break through. But human engineers had studied captured Keth specimens and found their weak points. Samuel's rifle fired special rounds that could punch through that armor like paper. Beside him in the cramped pod sat 3 other soldiers. They were his squad, his family. He had trained with them for 5 years. They knew each other better than brothers and sisters. Sergeant Betty Olson was the squad leader. She was 31 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much death in training simulations. She looked at her soldiers and spoke through her helmet's communication system. "Remember what we trained for," she said. "The Keth fight using fear. They expect their enemies to run and hide. They have never faced soldiers who fight back. Show them what humans can do." The pod hit the ground hard. Samuel felt the impact through his entire body, even with the crash harness holding him in place. His teeth slammed together, and he tasted blood. But he was already moving, his training taking over. The doors of the pod blew outward with explosive bolts. Samuel was outside before the smoke cleared, his rifle up and ready. The pod had landed in what used to be a shopping district. Buildings burned on both sides of the street. Broken glass covered the ground. Bodies lay everywhere, civilians who had not been able to escape in time. And there, 50 meters away, a group of Keth soldiers was turning to face them. The Keth were terrifying creatures. They stood on 6 legs, like giant insects, and their bodies were covered in thick plates of natural armor. They had 4 arms, 2 for walking and 2 for holding weapons. Their faces had no expression, Just black eyes and mandibles that clicked together when they communicated. Samuel did not give them time to react. He raised his rifle and fired. The first round hit a Keth warrior in the chest and dropped it instantly. The alien collapsed, its legs folding beneath it. The other Keth turned toward Samuel, raising their plasma weapons, but his squad was already firing. Betty took down 2 more with quick, precise shots. Private Carlos Webb threw a grenade that exploded in the middle of the alien formation. Private Nina Torres used her heavy weapon to sweep across the survivors, cutting them down like wheat before a scythe. In less than 10 seconds, all the Keth in that group were dead. "Move," Betty shouted. "There are more coming." All across the city, similar scenes were happening. Drop pods were landing everywhere, punching through rooftops and crashing into streets. Legionnaires poured out of them, armored soldiers who moved with speed and purpose. They formed into squads and platoons, advancing through the burning streets, hunting the invaders who had come to kill their people. Samuel's squad pushed deeper into the commercial district. They found Keth everywhere, but the aliens were no longer the hunters. They had expected helpless civilians. Instead, they found warriors in powered armor carrying weapons that could tear through their shells. The confusion in the alien ranks was obvious. They did not know how to respond. At one intersection, Samuel saw a Keth officer trying to rally its troops. The alien was larger than the others, with decorations on its shell that indicated rank. It was screaming orders, pointing toward a group of humans who were hiding in a collapsed building. Samuel lined up his shot carefully. He controlled his breathing, just like he had been taught. Then he squeezed the trigger. The Keth officer's head exploded. Its body stood upright for a moment, as if it had not realized it was dead, then toppled forward. The remaining Keth soldiers looked at their fallen leader. Then they looked at the armored humans advancing toward them. For the first time in this invasion, Samuel saw something in their black eyes that looked like fear. The aliens turned and ran. "They are retreating," Carlos shouted. There was wonder in his voice. "The Keth are running away." Betty did not celebrate. "Stay focused. This is only the beginning. We need to secure this sector and find any survivors." She was right, of course. The battle was far from over. But Samuel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the Keth flee. For centuries, humans had been the ones running. They had been the ones dying while others watched. They had been treated as less than nothing. Not anymore. The legions had descended. And for every human who had died at Varus Prime, for every colony that had been abandoned, for every promise that had been broken, the Keth would pay the price. Samuel reloaded his rifle and followed his squad into the smoke. There were more aliens to kill and more people to save. The work of liberation had only just begun. The price of vengeance, the Battle of Earth, lasted 4 days. When it finally ended, the Keth invasion fleet had been completely destroyed. 247 enemy ships had entered human space. None of them left. On the ground, the legions had pushed the alien soldiers back to their landing zones and forced them to surrender. Those who refused to surrender were killed. It was the most complete victory in the history of human warfare. But Commander Grace Liu found no joy in it. She stood in the medical bay of the Reckoning, looking down at a hospital bed. The man lying there was Lieutenant Commander Jack Porter, her weapons officer. Jack had served with her for 15 years. He had been one of the first people she recruited when she took command of the ship. He was smart and brave and loyal, and now half of his body was covered in bandages. During the battle, a Keth missile had struck the Reckoning's weapons section. The explosion had killed 3 crew members instantly. Jack had survived, but just barely. The doctor said he would live, but he would probably lose his left arm. "He's going to be angry when he wakes up," said Pete Morrison, standing beside Grace. Jack always said he would retire before he let them put a robot arm on him. Grace did not smile. How many did we lose? Pete hesitated before answering. 11,214 confirmed dead across all ships and ground forces. Another 8,000 wounded. We are still counting. 11,000 dead. Grace let that number settle into her mind. Each one of those people had a name, a family, a life that had been cut short. They had trained for years, some of them for decades, all for this moment. And now they were gone. The Concorde is calling, Pete continued. Every frequency. They have been trying to contact us for 6 hours. I think they want to talk. Grace nodded slowly. I imagine they do. She made her way to the bridge, walking through corridors filled with exhausted crew members. Some of them nodded to her as she passed. Others were too tired to notice. The battle had pushed everyone to their limits and beyond. When she reached the bridge, a communications officer looked up. Commander, the Concorde ambassador is demanding to speak with you. He seems very upset. Put him through. The main screen flickered, and then an alien face appeared. It was a Velar, one of the founding species of the Galactic Concorde. The Velar were tall and thin, with skin that changed colors depending on their mood. This one's skin was shifting through angry reds and oranges. His name, according to the data on Grace's console, was Ambassador Keleth. Commander Liu, the Velar said. His voice was cold and sharp. You will explain the meaning of this aggression immediately. Grace looked at him for a long moment before responding. She thought about the 60 years of hiding. She thought about the generations of humans who had lived and died in underground facilities, never seeing the sun, also that this moment could happen. She thought about Varus Prime and all the other places where humans had been sacrificed for a Concorde that never cared about them. Ambassador, she said finally, the Keth attacked human worlds with military force. We defended ourselves. I do not see what requires explanation. The Velar's skin turned a deeper shade of red. The Keth are a sovereign member of the Concorde. Any attack on their forces is an attack on the Alliance itself. Furthermore, your possession of a military fleet is a direct violation of the Integration Accords that humanity signed 200 years ago. Ah, yes, Grace said. The Integration Accords. The agreement that prohibited humanity from maintaining military forces. The same agreement that also required the Concorde to provide protection for human space. Do you remember that part, Ambassador? The part where you were supposed to protect us? The Velar hesitated. His skin flickered with uncertainty. The Concorde withdrew its forces from human space because humans proved incapable of responsible self-governance. It was a necessary measure to ensure regional stability. You withdrew your forces because you did not need us anymore. Grace's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it. You used 8 million of our people as soldiers in the Hive Wars. You sent them to die on worlds like Varus Prime while your own forces stayed safe in the rear. And when the war was over, you threw us away like broken tools. That is a gross mischaracterization of "we have records," Ambassador. We have testimony from survivors. We have evidence of every promise broken and every betrayal committed. Grace leaned forward slightly. The Concorde left humanity to die. You stripped away our ability to travel between stars and then withdrew all protection. You knew exactly what would happen. You were counting on it. The Ambassador's skin was now cycling through colors so fast it was hard to follow. This will not stand. The full military force of the Concorde will... Ambassador. Grace interrupted him with a single word. We just destroyed a fleet of 250 warships in 4 days. We suffered minimal losses. The Shadow Fleet you are looking at right now is only a fraction of what humanity has built. And unlike the Keth, we know exactly how the Concorde fights. We spent 200 years watching. We spent 60 years preparing. She paused to let that sink in. So please, send your full military force. We have been waiting 60 years for this conversation. We have been waiting 60 years to show the galaxy what happens when you abandon humanity. The ambassador stared at her. For the first time, Grace saw something in his alien eyes that looked like fear. You would start a war with the entire Galactic Concord? We did not start anything, Ambassador. You did, 200 years ago when you decided that humans were expendable. We are simply finishing it. The screen went dark as the Viller ended the transmission. Pete moved to stand beside Grace. Do you think they will actually attack us? Grace shook her head slowly. No. The Concord holds power because everyone believes they are invincible. We just proved they are not. If they attack us and lose, their entire alliance will fall apart. They cannot take that risk. So what happens now? Grace looked out the viewport at the debris field that had once been a Keth invasion fleet. Somewhere out there, rescue ships were searching for survivors. Somewhere down on the planet, the legions were helping civilians rebuild. And somewhere in the halls of power across the galaxy, every species was reconsidering what they thought they knew about humanity. Now, Grace said quietly, we make sure this never happens again. We build. We grow. We prepare. Because the Concord will not forget this. They will wait and plan and look for weakness. And we have to be ready when they come. She turned away from the viewport and faced her crew. All hands, secure from battle stations. Begin repairs and rescue operations. And someone find me a list of our dead. Every single name. They deserve to be remembered. The crew responded immediately, moving to their tasks with renewed purpose. The battle was over, but the war, Grace knew, was only beginning. A new dawn. The Galactic Concord did not send its fleet to punish humanity. The days passed, then the weeks, and the great armada that Ambassador Kelleth had threatened never appeared. Instead, something far more interesting began to happen across the galaxy. Fear spread like fire through dry grass. The news of Earth's victory traveled fast. Every species in known space heard the story. The forgotten laborers, the expendable soldiers, had somehow built a military force strong enough to destroy a Concord invasion fleet. Intelligence agencies scrambled to understand how it had happened. Diplomats whispered in corridors about what it meant. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, species that had been oppressed by the Concord for centuries began to ask themselves a dangerous question. If humans could do it, why not us? Daniel Cruz saw the effects of this firsthand. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, he stood in a conference room on Haven Colony as part of a diplomatic delegation. Across the table sat visitors who had traveled very far to speak with humanity. The Morthic were a species that had always existed on the edges of Concord space. They were stocky beings covered in thick gray fur, with clever eyes and hands that had 4 fingers each. They had been trading partners with the Concord for centuries, but they had never been treated as equals. Now their leader, an elder named Grath, had come to Haven to make a proposal. Your victory has changed everything, Grath said. His voice was deep and rumbling, like rocks grinding together. Many species are now questioning their relationship with the Concord. We have been told for generations that the Concord cannot be challenged. You have proven that is a lie. Daniel considered his words carefully before responding. We have no desire to conquer anyone. We only want to be left in peace to live our lives. Grath made a sound that might have been laughter. Peace is a luxury that the galaxy rarely allows. The Concord will not forget what you have done. They will wait and watch and plan. And when they think you are weak, they will strike again. Then, we will defend ourselves again. Or, Grath said slowly, you could accept help. The Morthic have resources. We have knowledge of Concord tactics and weaknesses. We have connections with other species who are tired of being treated as inferior. Perhaps together we could build something new, something better than the Concord. It was the first of many such conversations. Over the following months, representatives from a dozen species came to human space. Some wanted trade agreements. Some wanted military alliances. Some simply wanted to see with their own eyes the humans who had defeated the impossible. On Earth itself, the celebrations had given way to the hard work of rebuilding and remembering. Memorials were being constructed in every city, monuments to the 11,000 who had died defending their species. Schools began teaching new curricula that included the truth about the Shadow Fleet and the legions who had fought on the ground. Children grew up learning that their people had been betrayed, but also that they had refused to surrender. The hidden academies were no longer hidden. The underground facilities were open to the public, and people walked through tunnels where engineers had spent decades building ships in secret. Many visitors wept when they saw the cramped living quarters, where workers had spent their entire lives without ever seeing the sky. Commander Grace. Liu stepped down from active command 6 months after the battle. She was 71 years old, and 30 years of living in shadows had taken their toll on her body. Her replacement was a young captain named Victor Reyes, one of the brilliant minds who had helped design the Shadow Fleet's weapon systems. The change of command ceremony was held on the Bridge of the Reckoning. The ship had been repaired and upgraded, its hull still bearing scars from Keth weapons fire. Grace stood at attention as the crew assembled around her. "Captain Rios," she said formally, "I hereby transfer command of this vessel and all its responsibilities to you. Serve her well." Victor accepted the ceremonial datapad that contained the command codes. "I will do my best to honor everything you have built, Commander." After the ceremony, Grace and Victor stood together by the viewport, looking out at the stars. "The Concord will test us again," Grace said quietly. "Not soon. Right now they are too afraid and too confused. But eventually, some leader will convince them that they can win. That humanity's victory was luck or accident. And when that happens, they will come for us with everything they have. And when they do?" Victor asked. Grace turned to look at him. Her face was lined with age and exhaustion, but her eyes were still sharp. "We will be ready. We have been ready for 60 years. And we will be ready for 60 more if we have to." For the first time in months, she allowed herself to smile. "The galaxy forgot us, Captain. They left us to die in the darkness. But Earth remembered. We remembered who we were. We remembered what we could become. And that makes all the difference." Victor nodded slowly. He understood. Every human understood now. The ceremony concluded with the raising of a new flag on every Terran vessel. It had been chosen by vote of the entire human population, the first time in history that all of humanity had agreed on something. The design showed Earth as seen from space, small and blue and precious, surrounded by stars that no longer seemed so cold and distant. Beneath the image, in simple letters that could be read by anyone, were 3 words that had become humanity's creed: "Never again alone." Daniel. Cruz watched the flag raising from his hill overlooking New Pittsburgh. The city was rebuilding. New structures rose from the ashes of the old. Children played in streets that had been battlefields just months before. Life continued, as it always did. Behind him, Maria Santos stood at attention. She had been promoted to captain after the battle, recognition for her service during the darkest hours of the invasion. "Sir," she said, "the memorial service is about to begin. They are expecting you to speak." Daniel took one last look at the sky. Somewhere up there, human ships patrolled the boundaries of their space. Somewhere out there, alien species were reconsidering their place in the galaxy. And somewhere, in the halls of the Concord, leaders were learning to fear a species they had once dismissed as nothing. "Tell them I am coming," Daniel said. He walked down the hill toward the gathering crowd. Thousands of people had come to remember the dead and celebrate the living. They were workers and soldiers, children and elders. People from every colony that humanity had built among the stars. As he approached the podium, Daniel thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. 300 years of history, 2 centuries of service, 60 years of preparation, and 4 days of battle that had changed the galaxy forever. He reached the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces before him. "We have paid a terrible price," he began. 11,000 of our brothers and sisters gave their lives so that we could stand here today. We must never forget that sacrifice. We must never forget what it cost to earn our freedom. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But we must also never forget what we have proven. The galaxy thought humanity was finished. They left us to die. And instead of dying, we built something they never imagined possible. We built ships in the darkness. We trained soldiers in secret. We prepared for 60 years because we refused to accept the fate they chose for us. Daniel paused, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The future will not be easy. The Concord still exists. They will not forgive what we have done. But we are no longer alone in the darkness. We have allies now. We have hope. And most importantly, we have each other. He raised his hand toward the sky, where the new flag was flying above the memorial. Never again alone. That is our promise to the dead and our gift to the living. As long as humanity exists, as long as Earth remembers, we will stand together. And anyone who threatens our people will learn what the Keth learned. His voice rose, carrying across the crowd. We are humans. We do not forget. We do not surrender. And we are just getting started. The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the rebuilt city and rose toward the stars. Above them, the flag snapped in the wind, carrying their message to a galaxy that would never underestimate them again. The silence of stars had finally been broken, and humanity's voice would ring out across the cosmos forevermore.